Well, I was going to start by saying my name is Joe Wagner, but that's been said. This is my second PuppetConf, but my first time speaking at one. And I'm here today to talk about Event Inspector, which we'll be introducing in the Puppet Enterprise. Now, if you were at Luke Knies's keynote that opened up the conference, that you probably saw me for a couple minutes demoing it. We've also been demoing this in the Circ room, and I'm curious before we start, have any of you had a chance to actually stop there and take a look at it? Okay. Let's see, a couple people, okay, including one of us. Okay, well, I really encourage you, we're going to be demoing it for about 3 more hours after this talk concludes, and I really encourage you to go take a look. You can actually sit down and test drive it for a little bit. So today, I'm going to be talking about Event Inspector, and I'm going to, kind of the outline of this conversation is going to be, why did we build this? What problems does it solve? And what are the next steps for this in the product? So what is Event Inspector? My goal with Event Inspector is for you to spend as little time as possible using this, which might sound a little counterintuitive. I'm a designer. I really enjoy people actually using things I design. But really, like, why are you actually using Event Inspector? Why are you actually checking on how well Puppet is enforcing your configurations in Puppet Enterprise? You don't want to be doing that. You don't want to be staring at the screen. You don't want to check on that. You don't have to troubleshoot. Spending time doing that is taking time away from doing other things. And so my goal is really to get you into this and out as quickly as possible. Now, so Event Inspector is a reporting tool that allows you to check on how well Puppet is enforcing your configurations. And when you first get into Event Inspector, hopefully you can see this just well enough. It's a little washed out. When you first get into Event Inspector, you immediately have a status on your left that shows you how well Puppet is enforcing your configurations with 3 views, one into your classes, one into your nodes, and one into your resources. And so if you take a look at this, and you see that you've had changes in your last Puppet runs, but no failures, then you're good to go, and you're out of the tool. But what happens when you actually see there are failures? So in this case, Event Inspector is telling you that you have a single class that has had failures, you have 5 nodes that have had failures, and 1 resource that have failures. And so this is where Event Inspector really shines. It does a couple things really, really well. One is it gives you a broad context into what's happening as Puppet runs. So rather than just showing you which nodes have had failures, which is currently what you get in Puppet Enterprise, we're adding this. This is a real improvement in that immediately you know something about what's happening, right? And I've been calling this a reporting tool, and I cringe just a little bit when I say that because it is a reporting tool, but it doesn't just produce static reports. It's actually a highly interactive tool that allows you to actually investigate. Thus the term inspect. So if you do have issues, within a couple of clicks, you've already reviewed your classes, your nodes, and your resources. Then you can actually dig into this information. And with a couple more clicks, you're already looking at your event information. And this is really difficult to see, but this gives you information that you can use to actually get right to the problem right away. You can actually go into the command line and take a look at your manifest and actually fix whatever might be happening within your code. You can use Geppetto and get right into it and start working on modifying that. Because it gives you your file and line number. It gives you error messaging to tell you actually what has happened. It also tells you things like the node affected and the class that contains this resource. So it gives you this full contextual information very quickly. And that's the whole point of this tool. I want to talk for just a moment about, I don't know how familiar you all are with Puppet, so I'm just going to mention kind of, what are events? So this is inspecting events. So an event is Puppet's attempt to modify an individual property of a given resource. Now, that's the attempt. There could be several outcomes. So let's say that let's say in your manifest that you are saying you're ensuring that Apache is running. You've stated that in your manifest, and you're applying that to some nodes. So when Puppet runs on that node, it's going to attempt to make sure that Apache is running, right? Now let's say that Apache is not currently running on that node. Puppet runs on that node, and it attempts to change that. Of course, if it does change that, that's a successful change. But if it's unable to for any reason, they'll register a failure. Now, a skip is a little bit different. A skip is when it's often caused by a failure. If you have a failed event, so Puppet is unable to make a change that it expected to do, then that sometimes leads to Puppet not being able to even run on other resources. And so in that case, it registers a skip event. And so that's something that we wanted to surface here in Event Inspector. The failure is really what you want to troubleshoot. You want to go after that failure and resolve that, and then run Puppet again, make sure that's all cleared up. You can use Event Inspector to take a look. OK, yep, went from red to blue. Things have changed. I'm good. But skips really give you an idea of kind of the scope of the problem. So maybe I have a single failure, but I have many skips. It's like, OK, this is the source from the failure, but I can see that I have several other resources that were affected by that failure. How many of you are familiar with no-op in Puppet? OK, a little over half the crowd. How many of you are actually using no-op currently? OK, just under half, I think. OK, so no-op is Puppet simulation mode. So you can run Puppet in no-op to actually simulate what a deployment will look like. So whereas if you actually just run Puppet on a node, you're actually deploying configuration changes. In no-op, you're saying, let me simulate that deployment, and then let me take a look at what's going to happen. And if everything looks good, like I expect it to, then I will actually go and deploy. And so one of the things that I wanted to make sure that we did in this tool was surface no-op, because half of you are using it. And so no-op really works, and we'll take a look in a little bit at just how it works. But it works in the same way as the other events. You're able to see your no-ops through class, node, and resource, and track those all the way down to the event level, and actually look at your no-op events to determine if, yes, I do want to deploy, or no, I'm going to hold off, I need to go take care of something, and then run no-op again, make sure everything's OK. So this is, I'm going to jump back for just a little bit. This is kind of flashback part of my talk. I'm going to jump back to just before PuppetConf last year. July 1st is when I started at Puppet Labs as a user experience designer. And I was brought on to work primarily on the enterprise product. And so when I came on board, one of the first things I did was become familiar with the enterprise product naturally. So I spent about a week just going through Puppet Enterprise, also familiarizing myself with Puppet, of course. And then just understanding what Puppet Enterprise offers, and then where we could also bolster its offerings. And so I went through it. I took a look at the home screen, which actually has quite a bit of reporting, including event reporting, and I wanted to kind of point this out. So Puppet Enterprise has this today. On the far left, it has kind of a summary screen that shows your events by node. So if you have any nodes that are having failed events, we actually do offer that today in Puppet Enterprise. There's also this, we have trending day-by-day analysis of events at the top. We also have a list of your run reports as they come in. And for every single run report, so this is individual nodes, for every single run report that comes in, we let you know, hey, this run report looks good. Everything was applied correctly. Nothing to look at here. Or no, there's actually an error. So I also took a look at the actual node run reports. So if you open up one of those node run reports, you're looking at the metrics and the logs and the events for that node on that particular run. And then I also took a look, so we have event reporting in Puppet Enterprise, where you can actually run a simple query and get information about which nodes match certain facts. Of course, we have the ENC, Puppet Enterprise. And then I took a look at live management, which is mcollective powered interface for running Puppet and browsing your resources. So I got the lay of the land. And really the next step was, well, I did this for a week. And then I had a baby, or my wife had a baby, and so I was gone for a couple weeks. But when I came back on board, one of the first things I did was I said, OK, I now understand what we have in Puppet Enterprise. But what I really don't have a good grip on right now is, like, what are the needs out there? What are your needs? We're not in the business at Puppet Labs of just producing products and features that have a kind of a nice little marketing bulleted list. I'm not interested in that at all. We really want to actually design things that are going to solve real problems. And so I really need to understand what those problems were. So naturally, I came on board and I subscribed to our user groups. I started looking at Redmine to look at the tickets that are coming and the various requests that are coming in. And I was very fortunate that Puppet Labs is a customer-focused company, right? And so I didn't come in and say, oh, we know nothing about our customers. Let me get to work. There's just an awful lot of information I could actually just plug into. So of course, I talked to our professional services and our customer support. Those are the ones that work with you on a daily basis to actually solve real problems that you're having. I got to know our user experience group. It was already in the business of gathering information, gathering user needs, and designing product. Talked to our product group, got an understanding of what the roadmap was and what problems we were actually solving with what we were proposing for the roadmap. So this is really just kind of an information gathering stage. And one of the things that I found in gathering all this information was that there's a real need to improve our reporting. Now there are other needs too, and I've been demoing this all yesterday and part of today. And some of you have come up and talked to me already about, no, we really need this, we really need this. But reporting is one of the ones at the top of the list. So we understood that we needed better reporting, but what we really needed to do was to really open up a direct dialogue with you. And I wanted to point out Jenny Mahmoudi and Fei Guo. Those are our two user researchers, and they came on board right around the same time I did, just over a year ago. And they started our test pilot program. Are any of you signed up for that? Okay, a couple? Okay, cool, thanks. So our test pilot program is really kind of an organized system for us to, it's for you to opt in to say, you know what, I really want to give you input into the product. I would love to see the product in its early stage. I want to see the prototypes that you're building. I want to give you advice. I want to say, that prototype is not going to solve my need, that's not the right thing, or this is working, but that's not. And so through this test pilot program, we're able to do quite a bit of research. We're able to talk to you and get that input and put it directly into the product. And so at last PuppetConf a year ago, we had 130 people signed up. And when I left Wednesday to come down here, we had 400 and counting signed up. We're super thrilled with this. On a weekly basis, we actually tap into this pool of test pilots. And we send emails out saying, hey, we've got this cool prototype, this reporting prototype. We're working on a new ENC. Do you want to spend an hour with us and actually take a look at what we're building? And we share a screen, we show that to you, and then we get that feedback, and then we start iterating on our end. So one of the things I learned is that you guys are all snowflakes. You all have your own unique needs. But despite being snowflakes, there are a few themes that really kind of run across the gamut. And one is the reporting need. And one of the things very particular to a reporting need of better visibility into how Puppet's doing things is that Puppet Enterprise already does some reporting on how well Puppet is enforcing system configurations, but it's not really doing it adequately enough. So the good news is that Puppet Enterprise is really well suited to solve this. It's a GUI. There are a lot of strengths that command lines have. This is just a few of them. And there are a lot of things that the command line simply does better than the GUI will ever do. But the one thing the GUI has going for it is that it really can display information, allow you to really kind of slice and dice that and investigate that information in a way that the command line simply can't do. So I mentioned that Puppet Enterprise, it's a GUI. It does reporting. And today it already gives you some information about how well Puppet is enforcing state. One thing that we found in our test pilot program, talking directly to you, is that by and large, if you have around 20 or 30 nodes, looking at individual run reports to see how Puppet's doing works pretty well. It's not perfect, but you can get by with it. But as soon as you scale past that, and especially once you get up to 50 or 100, hundreds, certainly thousands, you can no longer rely on a list of Puppet run reports. You can't look at a single node to try to figure out what's going on across your system. So in this example, I think we're looking at 20 nodes, and I can see that there's a couple failures. So I dig into those run reports. What that would look like is I'd open up the run report, take a look at the log information and the events, try to decipher what's going on for that node. Then I go into the other couple, see if the same thing's going on or if it's a different issue. But let's say I have hundreds of failures. This is what I'm going to see. I'm going to see a sea of red. It's not just a sea of red, but it's like, OK, where to start, right? Like which one to click into. So I'm being a little bit harsh on our own current product, but I really want to be honest with you and just I want to be honest and just let you know that what we discovered is that it simply isn't scaling like it needs to scale. It worked really well for our smaller customers, but our medium to large customers are having a problem with it. So once we determined this, of course, we went to work. And what this work looked like. So we knew you need better reporting. We know that you need to just make sure that Puppet is doing what's supposed to do, so you can have confidence, you can move on with your day. So we started exploring some different prototypes. And here's a couple of screenshots, some of the things that we explored. I don't know if any of you test pilots actually looked at these at some point and gave us feedback. You did? OK. And so early on, what we were really looking at is event reporting kind of over time. And what we found was that there's certainly a need there, and I think there's a lot we can do there. And we did some really good work that's going to be valuable to us in the future, but the thing that we weren't addressing when we were actually looking at kind of historical reporting and trending was that the most important need to solve first in a scalable fashion was being able to show what Puppet's doing right now. And so this is an example of kind of putting something in front of the customer, putting something in front of you, getting your feedback and saying, oh my, we did a lot of work on this, but I think we made a mistake. Like, this isn't quite the right thing right now. It is the right thing a little later, but we got to shift our priorities just a little bit, shift our focus a little bit. And so we did. We started looking at how we can actually show what's happening right now. And one of the things that we realized, of course, was that the problem wasn't just in the actual kind of design of the interface. Part of the problem was that we were showing everything through a node-centric viewpoint. And so one of the ideas we had was to really kind of open up and broaden that context. And so we started playing around with other prototypes. This is using a program called Balsamiq, which puts everything in Comic Sans, which drives everyone crazy in the office. I'm actually probably going to stop using this because it's starting to drive me crazy. But basically, this is a way to prototype without actually coding things. And so it creates a PDF that's clickable. And so it looks like I've drawn this, but you can actually click in it, and it'll go to the next screen. It's fairly interactive. And so this is where we really started to look at, OK, we're going to look at just what's happening right now. And let's see if we can get the interactions right, where you can actually drill into this information really quickly, get what you need, and get out. And then as we were doing that, we were getting input from you that nodes are great, and we do care about nodes. We need information about our nodes. But really, we're concerned with kind of broader constructs than that, bigger constructs than that. At the end of the day, really, we're concerned with our services. We're concerned with that our applications are up and running. We're not necessarily concerned with just that node. So we decided to introduce a couple of new views, right? So class, node, and resource. And we wanted to preserve that node view in Event Inspector, so you still have that. Sometimes you truly do just care about nodes. But we added the class and resource view so we could get you a lot closer to those services that you care about. So I think most of you are probably familiar with this, but I just want to kind of go back to kind of like Puppet 101 for a moment. Classes are containers of code that are collections of resources, right? So they're these kind of larger constructs. And a class isn't necessarily synonymous with, say, a service, but it's much closer to that construct. And so in this case, I don't know if you can see it in the same. This is the same data that I'm showing here that I did in the demo the other day. We see MongoDB is the class that we're looking at here. That could be Apache. This is the thing that you actually care about, or it's a lot closer to the actual thing that you care about. And so in doing this, we kind of say, OK, we're no longer looking at this huge list of nodes. You care about Apache. You care about MongoDB. Let's take a look at that and see if there's a problem with that or not. So resources are units of configuration whose state is managed by Puppet. These could be files, services, execs, packages. And resources are kind of the how you configure things. Classes are the what. It's what you're configuring. And the nodes are where you're configuring things. And so we've really introduced kind of the what and the how. So you're no longer just looking at where things are happening. Now, of course, this is oversimplifying things just a little bit. Sometimes you can tell from your host name, you might have some information there that gives you some detailed information. But we're really talking about like as you scale up and you can no longer just rely on that host name for all your information. We're providing you some additional context here. So I backpedaled just a little bit, talked a little bit about how we got here. Let's come back to present day. As I mentioned, there's a summary pane when you first arrive in Event Inspector in Puppet Enterprise. In this example, you can see the failures and changes. What's not apparent here, it's washed out, plus there's no data here, is the no-ops. But you can see that there's a no-op section for each of these as well that you could drill into. So once you start to drill into any of these things, you drill into classes, nodes, or resources, we bring you to a new pane that's going to show you all the information that you need to know. We're disclosing everything kind of step by step. So we want to make sure that we aren't going from super high level to the most granular detail. We're trying to lead you along with just a couple of clicks. So in this case, I'm actually looking at a node here, and I have a little summary of what the event counts are, and I'm looking at everything that happened on the last run report for this node. I'm looking at the event type, whether it failed, skipped, no-opt, changed. I've got my resource, the class that resource came from, and the timestamp. One of the things that is kind of unique to this application is this left pane. This preserves the context of what you were just last looking at. So in this case, I'm looking at this specific node, but I have all my other nodes with failures on the left. If you do sit down in the circ room to the demo and start playing with this, you'll see that this is really handy when you want to take a look at a node, see what's going on, and you say, okay, is the same thing happening on these other nodes? Or, okay, that was interesting, but I didn't find what I want. Let me look over here. It's just a click, 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 and very quickly you have a lot of information. And just to contrast that with how things currently are in Puppet Enterprise, currently it's a little painful in that you're clicking into a node, you're getting into a run report, you're taking a look at it, and then if you don't find what you want, you're closing out of that. Coming back, you've kind of lost your context. You're trying to kind of like figure out where you are again, and then you're clicking into another node. So it's a cumbersome process currently that we're resolving with this. Now, if I'm looking at this node, I can also manage this node, and what I mean by that is there's a little link that will take me to the actual node page that you have in Enterprise Console that gives you all the facts for that node from the last run. Also allows you to manage the classes and parameters for that node. And if I click further, I'm now at the actual event information. We looked at this earlier. One thing I'll point out is there is a link to the run report. So we're still preserving that. There are times when you actually just want to look at the actual run report and look at the metrics, look at the actual log. So all that is still available. But it's not what you need most of the time. Most of the time you're going to get what you need out of these details right here. So it's one more click away if you need it. So I want to talk for just a moment about what's next for Event Inspector. So we purposefully kept Event Inspector fairly small for this first release. The goal is really to trim it down and make sure it's just highly effective at getting you this information so you can get in and get out. There's a lot of things that we'd like to do with it, but we first want to get this out. I mean, part of the reason I was excited to come to PuppetConf was to kind of show it off, but also just to get feedback on it. So already I've gotten a lot of feedback from all of you that have come to the demo. People are looking at it, playing around with it, and saying, oh, this is really solid. I can see how I would use this. Why don't you do this next? Why don't you do this? A lot of those things are things that are on my list, and we'll go over a few of them. And some of those are kind of surprises. And so I mentioned that we're going to be releasing this in Q4. There's a plan to do a follow-up release. I'm not going to put a date with that, but we hope to do in fairly short order to get another release out with added functionality. And this is where I'm really looking for you, and I'll open up the questions a little bit. Maybe we can talk, if any of you have some ideas. This is where I'm going to open. I really need your feedback about what we should do next in this thing. There's a lot of things we could do, and there's some things that are kind of higher on our priority list. But if you can persuade me. So what's next? There's one thing that I feel very, very, very sure of as far as what needs to go into this next, and that is robust filtering. So already there is, in essence, some kind of filtering, and that it filters by event type. And it filters, you have basically class node resource filtered by the event type. But if the whole goal is for this to scale for large environments, then I think the next step really is to be able to filter by node, class, resource, to be able to filter by fact. So an example of how you might use that would be, you might say, well, I just want to look at everything on such and such operating system. And go ahead and apply that fact, and then suddenly you're only looking at information for that. Or maybe use facts actually for different business units. There's all kinds of ways you could do that. We want to give you the ability to basically pare things down really quickly and just look at what you care about, bookmark those things so you can come back and look at just kind of that slice of the data whenever you need to. So this is something that I am already working on, and I can't wait till it's in the product. And I've gotten a lot of feedback. I mean, a lot of feedback is like, so, filtering? So it's coming up. So some of the other things that are kind of a little bit more maybes. I mean, I wouldn't say these are must-haves, but I sure would like to get these in. One is, so I kind of talked over the different interactions of being able to click down the list. So you've got a list of your failed nodes, click, click, click. And it actually works really effectively and really quickly. I'd love to be able to actually be able to say, hey, these 5 failed nodes, I don't want to look at each one individually. Tell me a story about all 5 of these. Go ahead and just compare these for me. And so that's something I'd love to get in the product. I'd love your feedback on. And I think part of that will come from actually using this as people use it, see if that's a real need or not. Running Puppet from Event Inspector. This is something that we've been talking about internally for quite some time. This feels like a natural fit to us. Kind of the full, I guess the full workflow would be, you've made some changes to say a manifest. You run no op. You see what's going to happen using Event Inspector. If everything looks good, you go back, you run Puppet, you push out those changes, you look at Event Inspector again, and then you verify that everything's good. If it's not, then you go back into your code. So there's kind of like this workflow. And so run Puppet is part of that story, being able to run Puppet from here. So if I'm actually looking at a failed node, I want to be able to make changes to my manifest, try to resolve the issue, run Puppet, see if it's cleared up, right? And being able to run no-op from here as well. That's not represented up here, but being able to run no-op from the UI as well. And I don't think I actually have a slide for this, but I mentioned actually going into the code. So I don't know if did any of you see the Geppetto demonstration? When you're actually looking at the event details and you see the file line and number, being able to actually just shoot you over into Geppetto would be a wonderful addition as well, I think. And we just kind of want to take you everywhere seamlessly. You shouldn't have to leave this tool, go find another tool, have 3 or 4 tools open. So that's kind of the world we want to get to. Currently in the circ room, we have some user testing going on. I don't know if any of you had a chance to do that. One of the tests that I put together, I think it's a fun test. I think people are enjoying doing this, is this paper prototype test for redesigning the main screen of PE, basically PE's dashboard when you first log in. So Event Inspector is not a dashboard, right? It has a very specific purpose. I have no desire to try to bastardize it and turn it into an all-purpose tool. It is what it is, and it does its job really well. But I think there's a real opportunity when you log into PE to have a more informative display. And so this test that we're running over in the circ room gives you an opportunity to build your own dashboard. We have a bunch of components you can put together. You can also create your own components and kind of come up with your own dashboard. And I'm really looking for feedback about what you want to see when you're in Puppet Enterprise. And specifically, what do you want to see that you don't want to even have to interact with, right? So if you could log in and just have the ideal dashboard, take a look at it, say all's well, or no, actually I do need to dig into this, what would that be? We're going to be reaching out to test pilots, and we're going to be running some little research, talking to pilots and getting some of this information, and we're already doing that in the circ room. So I guess my point there is really that when I talk about improving reporting in PE, we aren't just looking at Event Inspector. I mean, that's kind of like a first stab. That was the big first need, and there's a lot that we can do to kind of build on that, but there's also a bigger reporting need. There's things we can do. I mean, PuppetDB has a ton of information in it that we could be surfacing for you. And so what information exactly do you need to see right away? Wow, I've kind of sped through that a little bit. But this is probably good, since a lot of you have already seen the demo, and I gave you a little bit more in-depth understanding. I just want to open up the Q&A and see if any of you have any questions, or if any of you have any suggestions about where this should go. Yeah?
You kind of answered one of my questions. So you're surfacing public DB data, presenting that to the user. So when you talk about adding things like filtering by fact, is that already in public DB, and you're just putting a UI in front of that?
Yeah. So the facts are all stored in PuppetDB, and so we would just be running a query against PuppetDB, against the API.
Right. So I guess my follow-up there is,
yeah.
Is that schema exposed where we could go in and do SQL ourselves?
Yep.
Okay.
I believe so. So like, oh, it's not? Oh, I'm sorry. So Chris Price here, I asked him to attend because he is our kind of one of our PuppetDB gurus, and thank God he's here because I almost gave you the wrong answer.
So we have an API that lets you query almost anything you would want about PuppetDB without having to go straight to SQL. You mostly access it through but pretty much any data that you could get from SQL, you can get through the REST API. We're trying to steer people towards the REST API because we know we have schema changes coming down the road.
Okay. Yes?
I'd like to see is better alerting, because
Mm-hmm.
you know, it's 5 a.m., something goes turning on, and then it goes into the algorithm 10-hour plus.
Yeah.
10 hours okay, but it's not very good.
Yeah, that's a great point, and that's I missed an opportunity to.
The filtering part.
Yeah. I'm sorry. Say the last part. Build your own filter and. Mm-hmm. Okay. Yeah. Yeah. So tie that into the alerting system. Yeah, and that's something that I failed to account for that in here, but that's something that we have talked about a lot internally. So Event Inspector really worked pretty well as kind of like a monitoring display for just your Puppet events. So you can have it up on display, and if everything's blue, things are good. If you see red, then things aren't good. But not everyone wants to stare at a display. We recognize that, and some of you want to sleep sometimes. And so, yeah, I think that's definitely a next step. I don't know. Again, we're kind of jostling with these priorities, but that's really good input. We do definitely want to hook this into alerting, and whether that's actually alerting from PE console or just integrations with the kind of notification tools. There's a couple ways we could go with that. Yeah. Yes.
Anybody asking to be able to export the data that is displayed out to CSV?
Yeah. Yeah, we had. So I haven't manned the demo station the entire time, but I talked to someone just yesterday who said, export to CSV. Can I do that? And I think that's fairly low-hanging fruit. So really, I think at pretty much any point in this, certainly if you get to event details, but really any point in this, it'd be nice to be able to just click on the button, export what you're seeing. And so I think that's something that we'll definitely be adding. Yep. Anybody else? Yes?
We don't use the dashboard at all. We're all command lines, but the
Yeah.
security group in our company uses
Mhm.
the dashboard, and one of the things that they like to see is, so I had to first convince them to stop looking for, we're enforcing, 8-character passwords and all that, but more look for if something is changed, a change aspect on the dashboard.
Mhm.
But they would like to see a nicer, cleaner summary of the changed items, because that's all they're doing is auditing and making sure that our systems are secure for support financial institutions.
Okay.
But other than that, that's what's fine.
Okay. So they want better visibility into what's changed.
For the change part, for the auditing, someone's user account got added,
Yeah.
and we removed it because we had to ensure we moved
Yeah.
it. They don't have to go through sifting through each, what you said before.
Yeah. So, I'm supposed to be repeating these questions. I'm not doing a very good job because we're recording this. So your group would like better visibility in what's changed for auditing purposes. And I assume that probably involves going back historically. It's not just looking at the last run, right? So, I mentioned earlier that when we first started doing this, we were really looking at historical reporting more than like what's happening now. And so even though I didn't just have a slide, that's one of those things that we'd very much like to be able to actually just go back and have that full historical account and be able to display that in a way and export that, et cetera, for auditing purposes. And honestly, that's something that some of our professional services and sales guys are haranguing me about as well. So yeah, absolutely. Yeah, yes?
Kind of adding on to what he was just asking about.
Yeah.
Any plans to be able to actually take a split a catalog per node
Mm-hmm.
in a more human readable format.
Mm.
So for auditing purposes,
Mhm.
so you can give that to somebody and say, this is everything that's happening or that's being managed on that server.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. To directly answer that, no. I mean, there's no immediate plans to get that in. But yes, that makes a lot of sense, and we have talked about that internally. As you can see, just from already, we have 5 or 6 different things to consider. And so, and this is what I was hoping to get from you guys. And so really like kind of our next step when we get back to the office is to just kind of prioritize this for the next couple of releases. There's a lot of things that we could do with showing visibility into the catalog. I mean, one of the things, I don't know how many of you actually know what's on these shirts, but this is visualizing the catalog in a way that actually, where you can actually take a look at the different relationships on the graph. We've actually used JavaScript D3 to visualize this in kind of proof of concepts, to kind of take a look at the different relationships and to understand what's going on. So there's a lot of different ways we could do this, and we're kind of exploring with those. So this is just a purely graphical representation, but we definitely know that we could bring much better visibility into the catalog and into our run reports. Anybody else? Okay, thank you.